Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Pinnacle Health Informatics Data and Analytics webinar. We're pleased that you could join us today and that you made time to join us and to attend. So today, hopefully this will be an edifying experience. We're going to talk about SQL, structured query language for data analysis, and how to use some of the useful features in SQL that many of you know and leverage your experience in SQL and to get some insights into your data. So to begin, my name is Sean Fraser. I'm joined today by Olivia Hugentobler, our Director of Communications, and we're with Pinnacle Health Informatics. Pinnacle, just as a brief overview, has been around for over 20 years, principally in the healthcare data space. We have data warehousing and business intelligence products. We integrate with a wide range of electronic medical records, accounting systems, HR systems, time clock data systems, other systems we integrate with as well. So the idea is to have a broad spectrum of integration and bring in a lot of other data in addition to your healthcare data to give you that maximum amount of analytical power and get the most insight and make the best decisions for your agency or your organization. We assist companies large and small with a wide range of data projects, with thousands of user agencies down to just 100 or so user agencies, but data is important for all of them. And so we work with all of them. A structure or a knowledge of structured query language, SQL, is essential for any data project. And that's kind of where we're going to be going today. We work with data scientists, and everyone always talks about the fact that, you know, you can't really do a good project in data science, even if you move on and use R or Python or SAS or whatever, without a strong foundation in SQL. And so I always tell people, you know, if you want to be a data scientist or work with data, you've got to know SQL, just because it's how you get the data together, you clean it, you conform it, you deduplicate it, you get it ready for downstream processing. And today we're going to talk about just doing some of that in SQL, not having to go to other tools. We will talk about some of those other tools in future webinars, as we have in the past. But knowing SQL in that familiar environment, it's a great place to do some additional analysis. We'll also look at some code samples today, and we'll provide those code samples for attendees. And if anyone has a question at any time, please feel free to ask that, or raise your hand, or type it in the chat window. So with that, we're going to talk about some of the basic tenets of data analysis and some of the tools that are very useful to profile your data and get a sense of your data. And the first ones we're going to talk about today are central tendency and data variation. We're going to talk a little bit about frequency distribution. Does the data fall into a normal distribution? You know, is it random? Is it non-random? Is it you know, how does it fall? And that's going to tell us a lot about our data and give us some idea about how our data values look. Is it going to be a normal? Is it going to be a skewed distribution? These are all valuable things to know. We're going to learn about data symmetry and dispersion a little bit. And we're going to look at a histogram as well as box and whisker charts and see how those can help us analyze data. So with that, I'm going to... So what we're going to look at today are a couple of different histogram examples. And so on your screen is some code from an electronic health record data warehouse that we built. It's from a company called Credible. And we're going to look at client visits by the number of client visits by client, and we're going to put those into buckets. So we're going to look at the number of visits against the total number of visits, and we're going to put those into buckets and see how that falls out into a histogram. So we're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to be using the floor function, which takes the nearest value of and puts it in an integer, makes it into an integer. So if it's a fraction, helps us get some nice clean buckets. And we're gonna count the clients, and then we're gonna also count the client visits and put those into buckets. So we're gonna build what's called a common table expression here using a subquery a little bit, and we're going to join that up to a date dimension and just do this for the last fiscal year, the last complete fiscal year. And then we're going to break that out into buckets here in lines 25 to 29. We're going to break those out into buckets, and we're going to have quite a few buckets for this because we have a lot of clients we're looking at. And if we execute this query, we're going to see how this turns out. This is a pretty big, this is several million. So you're going to see, here's our bucket. So the bucket range, clients that had 0 to 10 visits last year, that's by far our biggest number. You can see how those kind of break out into the buckets. Well, let's put that into a histogram. I've got one ready here. And as you can see here, that's how that breaks out. We can see we have our buckets down at the bottom, and we have the number of client visits that fall into each one. And you can see here that it's not a very normal or smooth or even distribution. It's a kind of a very skewed distribution. And that tells us that, you know, most clients had between 0 and 10 visits last year. The bulk of our clients, it looks like we had 7,700 visits last year that fell into that first bucket. And as you can see, it's pretty gradual. It falls down. We do have some spikes here, which are kind of interesting. It's not completely linear or smooth. We do have several hundred clients that had well over 300 visits. Those are probably med checks or some kind of a daily service or some sort of an inpatient service, I would guess. So it's interesting to look at the data this way. We could look at these peaks, and we could drill into those and see who those clients are and why they differ a little bit. We can see for the most part, it's pretty gradual. It's heavily skewed, not really random data, but interesting nonetheless to look at that in a histogram and look at the distribution of that data. Pretty simple visit count by client visits. You know, how many client visits each client got. So not completely random, but we may want to look at a little bit different kind of data, one that's probably going to be have a little bit better distribution to it. And this is going to be assessment data. And we're going to take that same query, we're going to build our common table expression here, and then we're going to put that into buckets. And we're looking at an assessment called the OQ measures assessment. And we're going to look at the average score per client and drop that in to a bucket. And so we're going to kind of look at the number of clients, and we're going to count up the average score and see how that distribution falls. So we'll execute this one just to give you an idea. Okay, so that now you can already start to see here that the number of clients with these average scores is going to be, it's looking a lot better. We're seeing that central tendency here in the middle. And if we look at that, there it is. So these are answers to assessment scores, or these are answers to assessments, and we see now, and that's kind of what you'd expect to see, or you'd want to see in an assessment. You'd want to see those scores kind of breaking out in a normal standard distribution. And we can see that here. Nice bell curve. We do have a few little outliers, not many, a few. That's a nice distribution. And so that's what you'd expect to see. And you can always build drill downs into those and see how those work and get that data. So very interesting to look at your data in that way. So that is very important to kind of get a feel for your data. And the histogram is probably the most basic way to look at that. It's something that you need to employ in your data analysis. So that's the first thing I wanted to look at in central tendency and variation. The next thing is, let's look at something a little more sophisticated. Let's look at box and whisker chart. Now, this is also a measure of central tendency, but it's also gives you deeper insight into your data, and you can categorize these different charts in multiple ways to give you an idea of maybe how data is trending over time. And we're going to look a little bit at that, how data trends over time in a box and whisker chart. Now, these are a little bit more complex, and we're going to be using something called a quartile. And SQL does have some nice quartile functionality built into it, so that we can look at these this data distribution and the central tendency and how these values fall. And we'll let me pull up another system here. And I'm going to, okay, we're going to look at this. We're going to share my screen here. Okay. So what this one deals with is a issue that is called same-day access or open access, where people, where an agency is working hard to get people into the agency as quick as possible, reduce waiting lists, and provide service as quickly as possible. And so there's several thousand lines of code to get to this point, right? I build a nice flat table that has my fiscal year, my month start date, my days between initial evaluation, where the patient came in for an initial evaluation, and the first offered appointment. And of those of you who know open access or same day access, that kind of sounds familiar. And we see here that for this month, this was 2019 fiscal year. This looks like August of 2018. The days between initial service and first offered was really high, but you can kind of see it as the time goes by, the number should get a little bit less. And we're going to look at this and see if this really was improving, if there was improvement in this. We also have days between initial service and the actual attended first appointment. That's another thing we're going to track. And then they track, was this what they call same day access? Okay, so you have to kind of get your data. And this is where SQL comes in. It's very important to wrangle that data, get nice, clean, deduplicated data, and you just come up with a flat table like this. Okay. Well, then we're going to move that into the SQL code, where we're going to look at this by quartiles. And you can see here, we're going to be looking for some specific things. We're going to be looking for a max value. Okay, we want the outliers, right? We want to know what our maximum value is. We want to know what our minimum value is. We want to know what our mean is. That's our average, right? And that can get skewed by the outliers, our average. And then we want to know where the bulk of our data resides. That's really that's our central tendency. Where is that bulk? Where's the bulk of that data? It's between the 25th and the 75th percentile. But by using this with a window, with a windowing group, we use this within group function in SQL, we can then group by the month start date and order by the days between initial service and the first offered. So this is where it gets very powerful, these SQL windowing functions, and we can discern using that percentile CONT function in SQL. We can derive those and group them, which is very nice, very powerful. We can do the same thing with the 75th percentile and get the other boundary, get that upper boundary of our central tendency. And then we can do our median. And the median is that 50th percentile. Half the values are going to fall above, half are going to fall below. And that's also it's going to be that 50th percentile of that percentile cont function in SQL. So that's very nice. And we're just using our little flat table we built in the previous view. And then we're just going to look at this through a fiscal year, last fiscal year. And you can see when we execute this, we'll execute this again. That it'll go through and it'll give us those values. Well, that's nice, right? That's very nice that we can get those values like that. And we can see the distribution. So that's very helpful. Now, depending on your visualization tool, you can look at these in different ways, whether it's Power BI or Tableau or Click. For this demonstration, I'm just using SQL reporting services, and you can see I'm here in Visual Studio, and it has a nice way to build these. It has a built-in visualization, and I can pick my min, my max, the high whisker, the low whisker, the low box, the high box, the mean, the median, and the category. And in many ways, this is better. A lot of the Power BI visualizations aren't quite as good yet as this one, but they're getting there. This isn't, like I said, in SQL reporting services. So what that gives us, a nice chart. Now this one, you can see I have these listed here as information on the screen. Normally I would do that as a mouse over or something, but the customer wanted to see that. And then you can see that we're grouping it by month, which is very powerful. So you can see month by month what your data variance was, what your central tendency was. And you can see, last July, our max was 343 days from attended initial to first offered. If we scroll down, our days from initial service to first appointment was 319 days. And so you can kind of see how the data is progressing. And it looks pretty good. This is what they wanted to see. They wanted to see a very narrow band of the 25th to 75th percentile, and that's the purple. And the max is this high whisker, the minimum is this low whisker. They have the 75th percentile is 20, the 25th percentile was 5, and the minimum was 1. The mean was 29, and the median was 6. The median is this dotted line. The mean is this solid line here. So this is very telling because they can see this and say, oh, okay, we're getting better. We're getting people moved through into treatment and out of treatment. And that's very important. Now, this looks really good, but if we drop back to 2018, 2019, when we started tracking this, we'll run it for that fiscal year, and you can see that this agency wasn't doing so well. Now, I could do this in a crosstab report, but it's much more revealing to do it like this, where I can show it in this quartile fashion with this box and whisker chart. So you can see they started to get a lot better in March of 2019. Before that, before they were monitoring it, before they had this tool, they didn't really know how to monitor their same-day access for clients into the behavioral health center. And with this tool, they've just seen dramatic results. As we go to the next year, let's go to the next year and see. They want a shorter amount of days. And so they did have 1 month, August, probably people were on vacation, my guess. So their wait times got a little bit longer, but they kind of got it back on track. Another March of 2020 was up a little bit. Just a nice way to look at the data and look at your central tendency by month and look at your data distribution. Very powerful way to look at this. Look at 2021. See what that looks like. Yeah, that's looking good too. So we'll look at the first 3 months of this year. Yeah. So they're good, and this gets used every day, every single day. They're looking at this and deciding on how to staff, and are we meeting our goals? Are we getting our wait list down? Are we bringing people into service and getting them seen? So you can see that as time has gone by, the median to the mean has grown closer together. There are still a few outliers, and they can go investigate that and see why they've got a client that did take 61 days. They're supposed to have this done within, I think it's within 10 days is the goal. You can see the mean is 5 days. The 75th and the 25th are 6 and 1. So they're within their goal. They're meeting their goals. So very, very useful. And that is central tendency, and that's using a box and whisker chart, which is very useful. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. My box and whisker chart. So again, it shows central tendency with information about outliers and exceptions, and uses the SQL windowing functions for quartiles and that percentile cont function, which is very powerful. Those are two really, really good things and good methods of profiling your data. That's all I wanted to cover today. I wanted to just kind of break it up into 2 sessions. We'll continue this one next month, and we'll look at regression, and we'll look at multivariate analysis. And so we'll have another session where we do that. But I wanted to thank everyone for attending today, and hope that everyone was able to get some good information. If you have any further questions, please contact us. There's our contact information on the screen. And if you're interested, we'll actually send out all the queries that we presented today with the information for the attendees, and so you'll have that as well. And then please pay note of your inbox, and we'll be sending out some more information on our upcoming webinar. So if no one has any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We'll thank Olivia Hugentobler for facilitating the webinar today, and we thank everyone for their attendance, and we wish you all a happy day. Thank you very much. Take care.